Welcome, LilyPod listeners and LilyTube viewers, to another edition of LilyPod and LilyTube. And we have a special guest today with us that's going to talk to us about some really important healing modalities related to recovering from divorce or other tragic losses, and coming back to a place of peace and healing, restoration. So Cathy's going to go ahead and introduce her more specifically.
Misti Love is a mindset coach and certified emotional freedom practitioner. She studied EFT because it helped her own body to finally heal after a lifetime of struggle and health issues. She now helps people break free from trauma, anxiety, depression, migraines, chronic sinus issues, among many other ailments. Misti teaches healthy coping mechanisms to help people to absolutely thrive in life and not just survive. She believes that life is about moving through trials and struggles in a healthy way with proper and positive coping mechanisms rather than getting stuck and losing sight of our dreams and goals. Welcome, Misti. We're so excited to have you today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Great. Yeah, it's great to have you.
You want to start with the first question?
Well, yeah, I know, Misti, you have had some experience, as most of our listeners, with disappointment in relationships and having been married in the temple with great hopes a couple of times and then having those hopes dashed. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, kind of what you went through, the feelings that you had in having that experience?
Like you said, lots of disappointment. When you get married in the temple, I think a lot of people just think and hope for sure it's going to be for eternity. And this life gives us trials, and I don't know that we necessarily think of those trials and figuring out how to get through them together. And sometimes, it just doesn't work out. The disappointment of getting married in the temple and then things just not working out, it's devastating. It's not easy. My first one was, I feel like, a lot more difficult to get through. I did not have healthy coping mechanisms. And I struggled so badly trying to move through all of the grief and all of the disappointment. But at some point there's a stage of healing, just naturally going through all those things. That certainly took a lot of years through that first one. The second one, I'm just recently divorced since October, and I had wonderful coping mechanisms this time, and it's just made so much of a difference in my life and being able to move on and move forward.
Could you tell us, let me just follow up with one thing, and then could I just ask you real quick to give us a little bit more specific idea about what coping mechanisms helped you the second time?
So I learned about a coping mechanism. It's called EFT, the emotional freedom technique. I'll try to make this story a little bit short.
Like what time you need?
Yeah. As soon as I got married this last time, I just really found myself diving into a depression. And a lot of things had happened before I got married. I had just had back surgery, actually, and getting ready for a wedding, and dealing with all the trials that come before a temple wedding. That was really difficult, and I didn't really realize the toll that it was taking until everything just kind of, after everything was over, like my body just said, okay, I need to recover, I need to recuperate, I need to rest. So I was experiencing all kinds of crazy symptoms. I in 2 months I gained 20 pounds.
Wow.
My hair was falling out. Like all kinds of crazy symptoms were happening that I had never experienced before. And so
Isn't it
went to
crazy the stress that
Yeah.
divorce can cause on your body?
yep, yep, absolutely. Um, and so and this is actually after I got married. Um, and I like my okay, so I went to the doctor, took all kinds of blood tests, tried to figure out what was going on with me, and I got this devastating call that I was fine, nothing was wrong with me.
That's almost like the worst thing, right?
Yeah,
Can be
when I
harder.
say
Yeah.
devastating,
So there's
and
nothing you can do for me?
right, I was like, okay, do you want to run more tests? And like he ran all like cancer tests, all kinds of blood work that was worrisome to me. And I think I would have actually been happy if something would have been wrong and something to look at. In a weird way, maybe. So they call me, nothing's wrong with me, and I put down the phone and I'm just like, okay, now what? So I actually had a friend tell me about a chiropractor. He's a chiropractor and a kinesiologist. He works with NET, which is he works with emotional release too. And so as soon as I started going to him and started working with the emotional release, that's what it worked. That's what was working for me. So he actually gave me some homework one time, and he wanted me to go out and find an answer to his question. And that's how I found EFT, actually. It was a YouTube video. And I just, I utilized it. I, tapped on the points they told me to do. And the next day, I just noticed a huge and drastic difference to me.
So you
And
were sold.
so
You were sold, right?
obvious, I was ecstatic. Like it worked, and it was working on, things, just that one time on things that I didn't even know that I needed help with. Just the next day my mind was clear, and I was, making decisions like this instead of taking days, and it's just like, okay, I need to dive into this.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. So the question I wanted to ask, or maybe even the comment I wanted to make, was kind of along what Jeff kind of wanted to hear more about, and that is your healing came about through a conscious and deliberate effort on your part. Am I right? Like that's
Absolutely.
okay. And you found something that really worked well for you, and then you went and got certified as a practitioner so you could help other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's
Absolutely.
really
That's
cool.
how well it worked for me.
Well, and I myself discovered EFT, and I sometimes use it in my coaching practice because I am very familiar with it, but I'm not certified as an EFT practitioner. So tell us about like how you went about getting certified. What was that process like?
Um, well, I was okay. So first of all, I went and read Nick Ortner's book. It's called The Tapping Solution.
Yeah, I've got that book.
I think I was three quarters of yeah, I was three quarters of the way through that, and I just knew that I wanted to help others. I was able to work with my own self, the emotions that were coming up on a daily basis that I needed to process. And after reading that whole book, I felt like I could work with my family if they wanted me to, if they wanted to take a look at something. And I was just so excited to be able to help people to feel the way that I felt at that point, even.
Okay, so it was like you had a lot of self-teaching in that way. And then you
So
did a lot of work on yourself too.
Yes, there was a lot of self-teaching in that book. Literally, you go through it and you're utilizing the modality. You're utilizing the tapping points and the acupressure points and the psychology that they teach you. So moving on from that book, there's online courses that you can take. There's all kinds of them for EFT certification. The one I chose took me about 6 months to get through the first part to be certified to be able to work with other people. I'm currently in my second year of my master's program, taking a little longer this time. There's been a few things happen in life. So
what's your master's
I'm in the middle of that. I'm sorry?
What's your master's in?
It's in master's EFT program.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So you're still working on it, but you've spent a lot of time doing it and on yourself and others, and you've got a lot of experience. So yes. Would you be willing to kind of walk us through, and if you even could make one of us your guinea pig, if you'd like, because I know for me, I customize every time I do it. I walk through all the negative, and I like to go from left to right, because I like to think I'm letting go with my left side and I'm embracing with my right. That's how I do it. But you could just show me how you like to help your clients, and I don't mind doing it, or Jeff could.
Okay. Do we want to run through like a certain emotion type thing? We could do something like stress or something like that, something simple, or
yeah, that sounds good. That's fairly neutral, and most of us have stress, so that would be good.
I don't know how people can't. So I mean, honestly, even if you only tap on the points, your body will relax. It just naturally relaxes. Once you put an intention to it, like working on stress or working on anger or sadness or anything like that, it really just hones in on that one emotion to help process it.
Great.
So maybe do a stress. When I work on stress, I truly like to process it from the different parts of the body. So stress just goes straight to our organs, goes straight to, stress in our blood, stress in our mitochondria, everything in our cells. And I like to just process through that and, just throw it out, throw it away from our bodies. Like, we don't need it. It doesn't help us in any way.
Right. And we all have a lot of trapped emotion and need to release it. So this is such a great tool. And I did find it to be very, very helpful. And one thing we all have in common is that we've all been married in the temple, twice to marriages that ended in divorce. And now we're on our 3 times the charm, and we look forward to hearing about your 3 times the charm marriage, because I think sometimes that's often the case. I mean, like, you finally figure it out, like after all that pain and devastation. And really, we're better people for having healed from that pain and loss and figured out how to show up better in our relationship that we are in now.
It really is. I truly believe we are here to go through, some big trials. And for me, and maybe you, both of you too, it's truly been, like relationship and learning to get, learning to learn through these big trials. And there's hope. I know you guys are a big, gleaming bright star of hope for a lot of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, before you do your demonstration or whatever we're going to do on that, does EFT have anything in common with EMDR? Are they related in any way, or the principles?
The principles, yes. EMDR works a lot with the eyes. You can process a lot with your eyes. The EFT uses different acupressure points, which are actually the ends of the meridians of your bodies. So the meridians, or the points that we're tapping on, are ends of the meridians, which means it's a whole body experience. And so what happens, what I find that I like better, I don't know if I should say this, but what I like better with the EFT is that I can teach my clients the EFT. They can do it throughout their day if something pops up throughout their day. They don't need me to, do the EMDR, the rapid eye movement. They can work on the things that come up through the day without me.
Yeah, I do. I love it for that because it is something that we can do as a self-help. And I like how you explain that EMDR works with the eyes, and that is very helpful. I've also heard that walking is bilateral stimulation, so that helps. And you can also listen to bilateral stimulation recordings like on Spotify, and that
Absolutely.
all is like your own personal EMDR. And I think it just kind of works on the subconscious, like dreaming. But then the EFT is a little more intentional. But like you said, you can also just tap on the points and not set an intention and just have it help your body in general.
Yeah.
I think the premise of EMDR is that during rapid eye movement sleep is when we process trauma. And so if we can simulate that while the person is waking and process their stuff, they get over it. And I had EMDR and I thought it was the hokiest thing ever at first. I thought there's no way this ever works. But for whatever reason, it's kind of like Cathy alluded to muscle activation chiropractic, where they use certain pressure points to activate muscles that have shut down.
And they just push on these different places, and all of a
like
sudden your muscle works.
I mean, it basically cured my whiplash in one session after I'd had a car accident. So anyway, I mean, I don't mean to get off on that tangent.
It's hokey and it's weird, but it works. And if you know it works, then you use it.
And so I was going to say, though, with EMDR, like you talked about the eye movement, and that I found having to look back and forth and shift my eyes really stressful. And so my EMDR practitioner handed me these two cables that I held in my hands, and they pulsed alternately on the right and the left. And for whatever reason, that does basically the same thing.
We're all gonna have different experiences and different ways that feel better to us. I've experienced different modalities and different things that for other people worked great, and I didn't have the greatest experience.
Yeah. And I haven't always had like a big results with the EMDR, but I know that when we were first married and we had, okay, so this is just a little hint for those of you who have been divorced and you're getting remarried. I would be surprised. I would even be shocked if you didn't have some emotional sunburn bumping and some things to work through. And instead of marriage therapy, we went and did EMDR by ourselves. And all of a sudden, everything that was triggering that we could not talk about and we could not figure out how to be adults about just resolved itself.
Like we were both terrified to talk about money with each other because we had some different experiences with it, and particularly how it impacted previous marriages. And obviously, if we didn't want the same things to recur, we needed to be able to talk about it and be honest and share our feelings about it and whatever.
And now it's easy.
And it was a taboo subject for us at first.
And now it's so easy.
Right.
Like it's like we knew we had the ability to do that. Like we know how to be adults, right? But like something was stuck in us that was preventing that. So that's where I had my best experience with EMDR. Now, recently, I've been doing EMDR on accident-related trauma. Like, so I got in a car wreck where I was spinning, like, I don't know, year and a half ago, maybe. And it totaled my car, and I was okay, but like, I just have so much trauma riding in cars. Especially when I have no control, because that's when I lost control, right? And so this maybe is the kind of stress we could do the EMD or the EFT on. Because like you said, EFT is something our listeners, our viewers can do at home for themselves without a therapist. So this is really cool. This is going to be a gift to our audience. Now for our listeners, if you could just be specific about where we're tapping so that they know if they're listening.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. That's right. Really quick, I just wanted to tell you, you just brought up the accident. I think I have a client that was just in an accident, and this isn't her first accident. Her first one was actually not as bad of an accident, but she has suffered years and years and years of issues. She was just recently in an accident that was worse, and immediately that very first day she called me. She's like, Misty, I'm in the hospital. They're doing running tests on me. Like, I'm okay, but I'm not okay. Can we run through, some kind of, EFT? And the doctors were fine with it. And essentially in that scenario, I'm running through the trauma that she has, been through that day. Mm-hmm. And she didn't even have any issues with her neck. She was actually flabbergasted at how minute her symptoms were after that.
I should have called you that day. I didn't know you yet, though.
That's, a bike accident. I've had, a kid in a bike accident, and I talked to him that very same day, and he had hardly anything happen, and he did have a wound.
6 months of recovery in my neck, and I wasn't even that injured. So I am so excited to do this.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and do accident, because I'm sure there's other people who've experienced that.
Do you want to do it for accident?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Because I haven't experienced EMDR.
Okay.
I haven't experienced the results in EMDR that I want. I still am not quite as calm in a car as I want to be. I've seen a little improvement, intentional effort, but yeah.
Okay. I don't have that trauma, so you can go ahead.
Yep.
Okay. This is what I would normally ask someone to do. Okay. Is I want to I'll start it off and get you going, but maybe after the first point, this car accident made me feel, and I want you to say what emotions come up. Okay. Like at every point, this car accident makes me feel, sad, whatever, pain in my whatever comes up. That's what I would do with the client.
All right.
And so we're working on the emotional value. The emotions are a lot of times, and with trauma, and are a lot of times what makes it the body so painful. So when we go to the root and work on these emotions, the pain can heal and subside.
Okay.
So we ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's start right here. This is the karate chop point, like where you would hit on the side of your hand if you were to do a karate chop. Okay. Yep. All right. So I invite you to repeat after me. Even though I have this trauma from this accident that I went through.
I
choose to process this trauma now. And any emotions involved with the trauma.
And
I throw them all into space. Okay. So inner eyebrow. So right on the inside of your eyebrow, all of these emotions that came up from this trauma. Okay, outer eyebrow. This trauma that I have endured from this accident. Okay, under eyes. The emotions that I feel from this trauma. Okay, upper lip. All of these emotions that I have felt from the trauma. From the accident. Okay, on your chin, just below your lower lip. The emotions that I feel from this trauma, from the accident.
And this accident and others.
Okay. Right below your clavicle bones, right there in the middle. Top right there. This trauma from this accident makes me feel.
This trauma from this accident and other accidents. Well, this accident in particular was out of control, overwhelmed, frustrated, not able to choose.
Big deep breath.
Okay.
Okay. Let's move over to underarm. Just right under your armpit. Kind of a weird one, but it's super effective. Okay.
I sometimes like to hug myself.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Okay. The emotion
Or
that
look like
comes
a
up from this
monkey.
accident right now. Yeah.
The emotion that comes from this accident is out of control. And the emotion that comes from my other accident was shock. I ran into the back of someone I didn't know was there. It was shock. I was in shock.
That shock is a super important one to process. The shock will, we know what shock does to our bodies, and it'll put us in freeze mode. And sometimes it doesn't come out. It doesn't go away. Yeah. Okay, so up on the top of your head, on the crown area, the shock that I feel from those first accidents.
The shock that I feel from those first accidents.
Okay, let's go inner eyebrow again. The shock that I feel from those first accidents still.
The shock that I still feel from those first accidents every time I get in the car and ride with someone.
Okay, take a big deep breath right there again. Okay, outer eyebrow. The shock that I still feel from those first accidents.
The shock that I still feel from those first accidents.
Okay, under eye. I give myself permission to process the shock from those first accidents.
I give myself permission to process the shock from those accidents.
Big deep breath. Like, intuitively, I can feel that's still heavy. That's still heavy.
Yeah.
Okay. The shock from those first accidents.
The shock from those first accidents.
I choose to release it now.
I choose to release it now.
And I picture myself throwing it into space.
I'm throwing it all into space and letting it get out of me.
Okay. Tap underneath your clavicle bones, right there in the middle. What was the emotion that you said for this most recent one? The
out of control. I don't know if there's a one-word emotion for that, but it was out of control.
Helpless.
Helpless. Yeah.
Helpless.
Yeah.
Okay. This helpless feeling that I have felt since my last accident.
This helpless feeling I've felt since this last accident.
Let's go under armpit. There you go. That was a yawn.
To look like a monkey.
That means you're yep. That yawn means that you're processing any yawns, any burping, any sudden laughter. And we can be working on the most depressing thing in a sudden laughter. Okay. I felt so helpless.
I felt so helpless.
Crown of your head. I still feel so helpless because of this accident.
I still feel helpless because of this accident.
Okay, big deep breath.
Especially when I get in cars with others and I don't control the car.
Okay. Let's go inner eyebrow. I feel helpless when I'm in cars with others and I'm not driving.
I feel helpless when I'm in cars with others and I'm not driving.
Outer eyebrow. It makes me feel so helpless and out of control.
Makes me feel so helpless and out of control.
I don't like to feel out of control in a car.
I don't like feeling out of control in a car. It makes me not want to go anywhere, and I like to go places.
I feel so out of control when I'm in a car with others and they're driving.
Out of control When I'm in cars with others and they're driving.
I feel out of control when I'm in cars with others.
I feel out of control when I'm in cars with others.
I feel out of control. Oh, let me go back to what point we're at. Sorry, guys. Tapping on your chest underneath the clavicle bones in the middle. This fear that I feel when I'm in a car with somebody else driving.
This fear that I feel when I'm in a car with someone else driving.
Big deep breath. Okay, underarm, under armpit. This fear that I feel when I'm in the car when somebody else is driving.
This fear that I feel when I'm in the car and someone else is driving.
Okay, top of the head, crown of the head. I feel so out of control when somebody else is driving a car.
I feel so out of control when someone else is driving the car and when there's weather and I'm starting to skid.
That's scary for everybody, I think.
Yeah,
but
rain or snow.
But you're adding on top of something else. That's not easy. Okay. Let's go one more round. Inner eyebrow. When I'm in a car with somebody else driving, it makes me feel.
When I'm in a car with someone else driving, I feel helpless and out of control and a lot of anxiety.
Okay. Outer eyebrow. When I'm in a car with somebody else driving, it makes me feel.
When I'm in the car with someone else driving, it makes me feel so anxious and stressed out.
When I'm in a car with others, it makes me feel.
When I'm in a car with others driving, it makes me feel vulnerable to accidents I have no say in.
Okay, upper lip. When I'm in a car with somebody else driving, it makes me feel.
When I'm in a car with someone else driving, it makes me feel more relaxed than I used to since I'm doing this exercise.
Awesome. I like that.
Okay.
So take a big deep breath.
Okay.
So I love it when this happens. We're not going to finish go back all the way through, because when you are able to start saying something positive and something negative or traumatic doesn't come up, that shows me that you've processed through it.
That's awesome.
Yay.
Well, how do you feel, Cathy?
It just came to me. It was like I didn't need to say the other stuff anymore.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I could finish that on my own, I think, with when my tires skid. And one thing I found out, because it totaled my car, I got a new car and I got a 4-wheel drive, but I found out recently that the reason why because I thought it was just trauma, but I've been skidding all over the road with this harsh winter we've had here in Utah. And I found out it's because it has road tires, and road tires on an SUV is actually worse than a regular car, which I had before. So I'm going to get all season tires. So next winter will be a lot better in terms of actual physical safety. And so that will help, I think, support the processing of the emotion that was stressing me out on top of it.
So as you say you feel a little bit left there with what we've worked on, it actually will continue to dissipate a little bit, as a little bit time goes on. Even, I tell people after a session to, sleep on it. Like, don't think a lot about it, that night, and to sleep on it, and for it to really integrate that night. The subconscious is greatly at work when we're dreaming and trying to, process and figure things out. And truly, the next day, I will, check in with my clients and see, if it's changed or how they're doing. And
so it's almost like EMDR, the natural EMDR of sleep, process everything you just did. That makes so much sense. And I'm a violin teacher, and my son plays violin, and so I know that every day we practice, he processes what we practiced, and the next day it's better. So it's like that, I think.
Absolutely.
I'd I'd like to make two observations about trauma based at least in part on this exercise. One is it's interesting, excuse me, that Cathy would have been triggered by other people driving when in the accident she was driving. I don't know that there is a I don't know that there's a huge cognitive connection. I think it's
there
just
is, because it was moving out of control.
That's what I'm saying. It's there's not necessarily a connection between who was driving. It's more about, am I in control?
That's true, because I feel less control if my car loses control too. Like, I mean, either way.
Right. And then to extend this analysis to the realm of relationships. All right, someone may say in to themselves, you know, I'm really fearful when anyone else is in control, so I need to be the one in control. I need to be the one driving, so to speak, because I'm the only one that can be trusted to look after me. And I think I've seen, you know, mid singles of all stripes come up with these elaborate lists of things that they will not put up with next time. I've got to be in control of the money because in my last relationship, my husband controlled me with money. Or I've got to be the one in control of this or that because my spouse was the one in charge of that and I just won't put up with that. Or in my
case, I need to drive every time so I feel in control.
Yeah.
It's funny because we went, I mean, I know she's healed some from this even before this, because we were on a trip to California last week. I did most of the driving out there and on the way home, not all of it, but most of it.
I was a lot more relaxed. So I think the NPRs may be working better than I thought, but I still had stuff stuck, like you said. And when you had me breathe, I did feel that intuitive sense you had that I had brought up something bigger that needed to be.
But I mean, this could apply to almost anything. Like, we sometimes want to think the solution is outside myself. If I have trauma related to money, then I have to be in charge of that because I'm afraid that if my spouse has any say in it, they're going to screw it up and they're going to cause me to be homeless or whatever, you know. And I think one thing I'd like people to get out of this episode is the solution isn't in the rules you make for your partner. It's not in the way you try to control your external circumstances.
Because that's giving a lot of power to everything outside of you.
Yeah. The answer most often is right in here, and figuring out how to work through that trauma and talk back to it and whatever, so that we can be calm even in a situation that's less than perfect.
That's a really good point, Jeff.
So anytime there is control involved, a lot of times there's some irrational fears and triggers that have come up from an original event. You know, like you say, from an original marriage, and oftentimes even from childhood. People didn't have, you know, a say or any control over things that happened. And so later in life and later in years, they try to control, and not even necessarily the same thing. They just need to feel that control, that they're in control. So like for me, I'm always trying to find the root cause with my clients. And so a lot of times it goes back to childhood. A lot of times it goes back to a previous relationship. And it's really truly amazing once, you know, people really start looking inwards at those things rather than blaming the other person, because truly at that point it's a trigger to the original problem.
Yes, I love that. And that's a really good point too. So I love where this is going and how applicable not only the exercise itself is of EFT, but also really what we worked on with me, which was very specific to accident related trauma and how it can really morph into all the different kinds of trauma we experience. And
well, Misty, I know you're also a mindset coach.
Yeah.
And if I were coaching someone with this kind of issue, I know that what I would try to do is help them shift their mindset to um, to understanding that the problem is not external to them, that it and the solution is not about getting other people to behave differently, or taking more control of their surroundings or whatever. The answer is really to get peaceful. And then I think when you're peaceful, you see more clearly what you can change and what you can't, and then you can invoke the serenity prayer. You want to have the serenity to accept the things you can't change and the courage to change the things you can.
And you could even set that as an intention as you work through those tapping points.
Yeah.
Without the serenity, you don't see that clearly.
Right. Absolutely.
You're reminding me.
So, with the mindset part of it,
oh, sorry. I was digressing. But you reminded me today of how much I love EFT. And then we're on to mindset coaching, which is also very important. We love that too.
I love it.
Yeah. So we do a lot of mindset coaching. Have you heard of our FCBO model at all?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So it's our version of mindset coaching for, and we find it to be very effective for
it's one of the bigger tools we use.
Yeah. One of many. Anyway, what do you use for mindset coaching?
So a lot of my mindset coaching is actually moving forward from the trauma and the processing, and is a lot of moving forward and into limiting beliefs and processing those. I'm actually getting ready to come out with a program for those, to work through those, moving along with somebody's vision board. Like, a lot of people have these vision boards, and for so many people, they make these vision boards, and you're told to dream when you're making these things, these big goals, and a lot of people will look at them and every day and just not believe them, not believe it's possible.
Right.
And
so there's a lot of limiting beliefs is the key, is what you feel like is the key.
There's a lot of limiting beliefs underlying, and even subconscious, some that we're born with even, that can pop up, and it won't allow us to achieve those things if we don't believe it.
Misty, and I'd love your reaction to this, but I am dubious sometimes about affirmations, even though I use them and I think they're useful. But if you are repeating an affirmation all the time that, excuse my French, your mind is saying bullshit to, if you're constantly repeating an affirmation that your mind resists because it can't believe that much yet, you're actually doing yourself more harm than good. So I think you have to adopt an affirmation that you can believe. It's not
or
real.
In her case, you have to get rid of the limiting beliefs so you can believe it.
Right. And I think that there's all kinds of examples you could use. But if I made $12,000 this year and I keep repeating to myself, by the end of this year, I'm going to be a millionaire, chances are slim that I'm going to be able to believe that.
Right.
And
absolutely.
And repeating it over and over isn't going to change that.
So here's the thing, and what I have learned, if you have an affirmation that you are working on, hone in on one of them and tap on these points that we were tapping on today. It creates the somatic response and allows the body to help process why you don't believe that, and what that limiting belief is.
Did you say somatic response?
Yeah. That's I really like tapping in affirmations, and I say tapping in, I'm tapping on these points, and it's much more helpful than just saying it or trying to get yourself to believe it. You're including the body and helping to process also, again, some of the underlying things as to why you don't believe it. you're clearing those pathways.
So that's going to be kind of the opposite, where you were trying to help me release some trauma. It would be like the tapping in the thing you want to believe, the thing that you want to believe.
So what are you going to replace it with?
What you're replacing it with. So it would be like, I am safe in cars. It's okay. And if I get in an accident, then I get in an accident, but I don't need to be stressed every time I'm in a car. Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can turn it around. Absolutely. Here's the thing, and kind of, if you want to start with tapping in affirmations, if you are tapping them in and you still you can't get yourself to believe it, there's usually another underlying something else going on there that needs to be processed. A little bit like what you're saying, Jeff.
Oh my gosh, I love this. And I love the way you approach the mindset coaching. And it's very different than the FCBO model. And I think both are very, very useful. For us, so for those of you who don't know what our FCBO model is, it's basically separating out the stories from the facts of our lives. And most of us think our stories are facts, and they're not, which means they're optional, which means we can change them, we can shift them, and we can reframe. So that's more of a mind gym. And I think you're working more on the body gym, let's harness what we know about the emotions around this thing. Let's get honest with ourselves about it, and let's tap it out and release it. So it's just different. And
absolutely
important.
Can you tell us about some of the emotions that you had surrounding divorce that needed to be worked through, and kind of what you did about it?
Well, here, let's start with the first divorce. That was much more traumatic for me.
Same with us.
I think just going through it the first time, all the and I say I'm gonna say betrayal, but I'm not saying that because of something that he did. That's an emotion that had comes up in the whole divorce process. This person that once loved you and now is, you're fighting for your future, really, your future self. And so, there's just a lot of fighting in divorces.
Even if he didn't mean that.
Yeah. So that was probably the biggest heartbreak for me, is this person that's, loved you for 7+ years, or loved me for 7+ years, all of a sudden you're fighting, and you're just, going at each other's throats, essentially. And it's mind bending and mind blowing. But unfortunately it's normal. But like, for me, I didn't understand that. It didn't make sense that this person once loved you so much, and they're willing to just throw everything at you, all the garbage and everything. And so I felt just beyond betrayed because of that. And it's something that I think you naturally feel in divorce. I felt it this last time for sure. So betrayal is a huge one, for that reason, especially. It's interesting now that I think about it. That first time, once my divorce went through, I remember I went out on a date the very next night. I felt like I was I felt like I was ready to get out there. I felt pretty good by then. But it's amazing in the 6 years after that, how much I needed to learn and experience to really get to a point to where, I could attract something different.
I want to ask you something about that, because we've seen this phenomenon a lot where you see somebody who gets divorced, and 3 months later they're tying the knot, or 2 months later. And I'm not I don't mean to sit in judgment of anyone who did that. I know some of those relationships have worked out,
Yeah.
but I remember talking to somebody a long time ago that I went to high school with who had gotten divorced. And this is before I was ever divorced, that I had this conversation. But I asked her, what was the difference between her two marriages? And she said, I married the second husband so quickly after the first divorce that I hardly remember where one leaves off and the other starts. And
Wow.
and I think, for me, uh, it is a matter of healing the trauma and all of that. That is all really important. But it's also about being able to reflect from a place of peace on and look back and see the things that I might have done better, or that, how I contributed to the conflict or the problems, in a way where I'm not shaming myself, but just as information, uh,
Yeah.
so that I can show up differently the next time. And I know I'm a different husband now to Cathy than I was to my first wife. So I can't look at my first wife and say, that's all on you, just because we
Right.
have a good relationship. That doesn't necessarily mean that it was all my former spouse's fault,
Right.
because I'm a different guy now and I'm behaving differently than I used to. And so I
Right.
think there's another component besides the trauma. It's also, how am I showing up, and having time to evaluate that from a place of peace. And I almost feel like, if even if you've resolved a lot of the trauma, if you haven't had time to peacefully contemplate your own role in the problem. So
Yeah.
why don't you go ahead and comment on that?
Okay, so that takes me to a little bit like how you guys said you went to EMDR a counselor and did the EMDR, but she or he separated you. If you consider that, maybe but I do actually work with couples, and that's what I do. I separate them and we work on their each of their scenarios going on, or what's going on from the past, the trauma from the past. um and so looking back on a failed relationship or a failed marriage, um I once you can get to a place where you're not blaming the other, and you're focusing on what your part of it is, and you're focusing on what the lesson was of it, um there's a lot of freedom and power in getting to that place.
Right. Even if
Yeah.
there's a little pain in the self-discovery,
Yeah.
like, do you know of Dr. Greg Bear?
I don't.
Wrote a best-selling book called Real Love. And I remember reading it when I was going through my divorce, and some of our listeners know the story. We actually interviewed Dr. Bear on our program here. But yeah, I with that book, I remember he focused a lot on honoring. Well, he called it the law of choice, but it's essentially honoring agency. It's saying, real love doesn't say, I will love you if you change. I will love you if you do this. I will love you if you do that, but I'll love you less if you don't. And so he was saying, you need to release your need for the other person to be a certain way and just love them as they are. And my mind fought with that intensely. Like, well, what do you mean? Didn't she make covenants? Didn't she promise to love me? Didn't she, and don't I've supported her financially all these years. Doesn't she owe me something? I mean, I would go through all these scenarios in my head about why I should be able to expect things of her. And the thing that finally brought me around, I think, was the thought that, um, she has her choices, she has her agency, and love not freely given is not real. So if I try to compel it or manipulate it, uh, or exercise some control over her choices, um, large or small, then I am, I know that what I'm getting is not real, that it's, you know, it's because I kind of manipulated it or forced it or whatever. So I'm not getting what I really wanted anyway. And anyway, that book was painful for me until I finally sort of surrendered to that idea. And, you know, I think that's, I think sometimes the process of discovering, oh, I could have shown up differently in a way that honored my partner more, or it,
and therefore I can in the future.
Right. Sometimes it's a painful moment to get to that realization.
Yeah. Absolutely. I find that a little bit like what you're saying is when you have this vision of what this person is going to be like in the future and what you want to see out of them. But as soon as you do that, you're really kind of in this like zone you don't want to go to. Like I super duper try to focus on the here and the now and what can we do today in this relationship, or even, you know, as we're singles, what can I do to help myself to become a better person? It's not necessarily about the future, it's about the now. We can't do anything about the future right now.
Yeah. I mean, I love that verse in Ether. Sorry, Cathy, I will let you have your second. I love that verse in Ether. If men come unto me, I will show unto them their weakness. And you think, why would I want that? You know, hold up a mirror and say, look how ugly you are. Why do I want to see that? But there's a promise that his grace is sufficient, that if we have faith in him, our weaknesses will become strengths. And so I think that process, yeah, it might be painful for him to show us our weakness, but if we allow the process, you know, he who receiveth light and continueth in God receiveth more light.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think we ultimately do benefit, even though there's some moments when it kind of hurts to see that, you know, I wasn't as loving toward my former wife as I thought I was, you know.
And I think that supports what I wanted to say in observation, because I've always, for a long time, I've said EMDR for us individually was the best marriage therapy I've ever experienced. And I don't think it's just the EMDR, although I do think that was highly effective. And I think I'm going to start utilizing EFT more. I'm super excited about it. It's been something. So I've been doing Jin Shin Jitsu. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been doing that as a practice. I have someone I see every other week, and she gives me assignments. I mean, right now I do the spleen and stomach flow every day. So I do a lot of holding of points and I do yawn. Yawning is my thing. That is how I know it's working. Yeah. Yeah. So what you mentioned about yawning made sense to me, because that's something I experience all the time. It's amazing. Absolutely. Every time I yawn. In fact, my mascara runs like if I haven't done. So
absolutely.
After. But anyway, I don't think it's just because of a modality. I think the best marriage therapy, maybe for everyone, is whatever you do to self-discover and self-master. Because I think a lot of times when we go to marriage therapy, we want to fix our partner. And it's really easy to see the flaws in other people. Maybe not
just sometimes.
I think most do.
Right.
I think that's where most couples begin, as they're going in for a referee to tell them who's right.
And we coach couples all the time. And like, I think sometimes they're a little shocked to discover that we're going to work on their stuff.
Right.
We're not going to work on their partner's stuff. When they're partners with us, we're going to work on their stuff. But like, it's always about the individual. And like you said, what we can do right here and now to improve. And that's what's going to create our future ultimately. And I was thinking about kind of like a sliver. It can be painful to dig out a sliver, but ultimately relieving. And I think with what Jeff was saying about that scripture, that it can be painful to look in the mirror and see our weakness, but ultimately it's relieving when we then have that grace that's sufficient to help us change it. And it makes all the difference in our own lives and in our relationships.
Yeah, and if we understand that it's God working in us,
Absolutely.
if we understand as we see those weaknesses or those problems that it's God working in us, I think it's a little bit softer. I think it's less shame and more, okay, God is working with me. I'm learning about myself and becoming a better person. And
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And that grace is sufficient. So when we find those ugly spots, it's not shameful. It's like, okay, let's take it out.
Yep, absolutely. If we go back to even, along those same lines, when, in the scriptures talk about the natural man,
mm,
um, you know, we we're supposed to move forward. We're supposed to, learn from these experiences. We're supposed to grow out from this natural man into, this godly creature, essentially, and find that love that true love that Christ talks about.
yeah,
Beautiful.
and I think the thing that gets in our way very often is the trauma, the fear, the ego, all of this self-focused stuff. um, I'm not good enough, no one is good enough to me, I'm not lovable, whatever it is. And at the end of the day, I think when that stuff is cleared away, we can become that godly self that you're talking about.
Something that I have found that as we clear these things away, as we process through these traumas and these bad experiences, these bad marriage circumstances, that it clears it away, it clears out the bad and allows for the good, allows for that relationship that we want with Heavenly Father, and that allows the good in so that we can embrace it instead of pushing it away.
Yeah. And that's the gift of the crisis of divorce, is that there is this beautiful opportunity to really work on ourselves in a way that prepares us for better relationships in the future than we ever thought possible, even. And sometimes we talk about like, we should have met sooner. We should have had our kids together. We'd have like 25 years under our belt. And we're like, no, we were not the same people. And we could be. We had to learn from those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I've sometimes jokingly said to her, I wish we could have met when you were 18 and I was 30. And she says, you wouldn't have liked me when I was 18. And
right.
I mean, and looking at myself, I got married
and I wasn't bad at 18. I just didn't,
right.
I didn't know what I didn't know until I knew it.
I mean, I look back
Absolutely.
at myself when I was 26, was when I first got married. My parents were separated at that time. They had had a pretty rough marriage for a lot of years. And I had a lot of trauma from that I didn't even necessarily realize. I thought, well, I can solve what went wrong with my parents, not necessarily solve it in them, but solve it in myself by creating a better marriage with my wife. But I was coming to that marriage with so much fear. Every time the slightest little thing went wrong, it was bells and whistles were going off like, I can't let this become like my parents. And so in a lot of ways, I tried too hard. Had to fix every little thing that happened. And, I was pushing to try to make sure it never ended up like their marriage. And of course, when you're acting on fear,
Overcompensating,
you often make the wrong decisions. And I did make a lot of the wrong decisions with good intentions, but also driven a lot by fear. And so,
Something. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think I have a lot more skills now because of what I went through, and I show up better in this marriage. Not perfect, but certainly better.
Absolutely. Those skills that you have learned are what's important. We often say, from our childhood or from our parents' marriage and divorce and everything, that we want to change that. I know I did.
Right.
But what did we learn in that experience? We learned those skills. And we can say that we want to change it, but until we come up with different skills, we don't oftentimes don't know how to do that.
I didn't.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that, because we run a coaching practice together and we've learned these tools that we teach others together, and we practice them ourselves, like we're calling each other out all the time on our stories and our perceptions and our interpretations are like, is that serving you? Like, and it's not in a like, and a lot of the times it's in a teasing fun way and we laugh about it, you know, and
You're
ultimately,
both open to it.
yeah, and ultimately we can keep whatever story we want. In fact, I mean, sometimes we're like, I just want to be miserable right now, I'm going to keep the story. Like, but at least we're being honest about it and we're not like just saying this is a fact because I think it.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Anyway, which gives us the freedom to choose. And yeah, sometimes we want to be, and sometimes there's purpose in being sad when really sad things happen. And we want to keep thoughts that keep us sad for a while, like with big losses, you know, and just, and then eventually we're like, okay, I'm done with that. Let's change the thought so that we can feel something different.
Right. Absolutely.
What does emotional freedom mean to you?
Emotional freedom. I like to say this a lot is, life is going to show us, trials. Life is not just going to be, sweet and perfect and nothing ever happened to us. So what I like to say is emotional freedom to me is, being able to be in the middle of a hard trial even, and to be able to keep moving forward, not getting stuck there for, days, months, years, to be able to just keep working through it. It's emotional freedom isn't, this big, I'm going to be happy all the time. It's really, truly, the thought of being able to get through these things without getting stuck.
I love that. And because we have like probably a lot of stuck people out there who,
not probably.
Well, the thing is we all relate, like both Jeff and I relate to what you said about having your first divorce be the hardest, the most traumatic, and having it last a long time and getting really stuck. And so you found these tools that keep people from getting stuck so that they don't have to have it be so hard. Divorce is going to be hard, but it doesn't have to be as hard as we make it with all of the stories we tell, with all the perceptions we have, and those limiting beliefs we stay stuck in.
The judgments, the whole thing.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. As now, I was, the first time after my divorce, I was single in my 30s. Now I'm mid 40s and I'm single, and I'm seeing, even since October, an awful lot of stuck in the issues in the last relationships, and awful lot of just not being able to acknowledge what's happened and not able to accept and not be able to move forward. Which, what is that going to do? It's going to create, a possible future relationship that's even shorter than your first. It just adds up, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, you have to heal what's in you to move into a healthy relationship, which is why we our first course is life design after divorce, and it's purposely to heal from divorce so that you can move on and have healthy relationship, because you can't do that without the healing portion. But we also don't want the healing portion to take forever, so it's a 12-week course, and our goal is to help everybody who moves through that course to get unstuck and to stop being in their way, and at least be on the road to a healthy relationship, which then we'll have another course on creating new healthy relationships. But that healing piece has to come first, but we don't want it to take years and years, because a lot of people do. They take years or even decades and they're still not healed. And we don't want that. Like, we really don't want that for anyone, because that's just, sometimes we hide behind I'm healing and working on myself for years because we're still scared. And we want to get beyond that scared part and really thrive.
Really experience joy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, just as an aside, if I can reassure you a little bit, for me at least, dating in my 40s was a lot easier than dating in my 20s. And I wouldn't have expected that But by the time I was in my 40s, I was a lot more comfortable in my own skin. You know, I had an idea of what I had to offer. I understood better some of the mistakes that I had made. And if someone rejected me, it wasn't quite so traumatic as it had been. In my 20s, all I could do was stare at the wall for 3 hours, you know, horrified. Oh, I shouldn't have asked her out, you know, whatever. And in my 40s, if somebody wasn't interested, okay, that's not my person. Next.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so I think if you approach it with that kind of confidence, you know, you attract other people who have that kind of confidence, and it's easier, not easy, but easier to create a healthy relationship.
Yeah. Well, you know, as we wrap up this interview, I was thinking maybe you could just give us like a few of your favorite coping mechanisms, because that was another part of your bio that I wanted to explore real quick. So we've talked about EFT, emotional freedom technique, mindset coaching from the standpoint of letting go of limiting beliefs, and then you have coping mechanisms. Tell us a little bit about that.
That and anything else you've been burning to say this whole time.
um, so along that lines, and this is a little thing that I've just come up with. Sometimes for me, you know, I can't just, you know, if I'm at work or, you know, some kind of emotions come up or even a trigger comes up, I can't just, I can, but I'm not just going to start tapping on my face and on these points in a store or in the middle of my workday or something like that, right? So there's a huge thing that I realized, the whole thing with the EFT especially, is acknowledging, accepting, processing. So I've kind of come up with this little hands-free EFT, if you will. And there's power in acknowledging any emotion that has come up or a trigger. There's power in accepting it. And there's power in processing it and even thinking about, you know, throw it into space, throw it away from your body, away from your mind, you know, do this, you know, I like to, you know, just in my head visualize like this dark cloud of whatever this emotion that I'm feeling, and just throwing it, whether, you know, Christ will take it from us in a heartbeat. And for me, sometimes I'll picture, envision, you know, giving him this dark cloud of whatever emotion I'm feeling and him just throwing it over his head.
I love that.
So
and
the acknowledging, is that just framing or understanding in ourselves that, okay, this is trauma speaking to me?
I think it's acknowledging a feeling you're having.
It's acknowledging a feeling. It's acknowledging what you've been through. And what has happened. A lot of people don't even get that far to acknowledge something that has happened to them, trauma related or emotional. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So acknowledge your experience and your emotion.
Yeah. So like on a daily coping mechanism though, say, you know, I'm gonna say, okay, I'm at work, I'm angry about something. Okay. And I don't like I've felt it, like I've felt it for as long as I need to feel it. If I let it fester, it's certainly not going to get me to a place that I want to get to. So there is power in feeling it for sure. But when you're ready to move on from it, this is what I would do with anger. This anger that I feel, acknowledging it, I accept this anger. And I choose to process it from my body and I give it to my savior, or I throw it into space. If you don't want to give something to your savior, if you're not in that place, throw it into space. Just so acknowledging, accepting, and processing it. Get it away from you, and you know, take a big deep breath after that. It's a simple little coping mechanism that you can use daily, and it really does almost immediately process, you know, something uncomfortable.
Awesome. I love that. And that's a great way to end with just a very simple yet profound way of acknowledging, accepting, and processing our emotions and our experience. And I think that's also compassionate, self-compassion in that process of acknowledgement and acceptance.
Yeah.
And then giving
absolutely.
it away, choosing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Beautiful.
So is there a part in the acknowledging in accepting what it is that's really happening inside us?
There's, if we don't acknowledge something, we can't work through it. If
Right.
we're in denial, we can't even start to work through something.
Yeah. One thing my EMDR therapist said is when you were a child, you needed to love your parents because you needed them. And you needed to make the things they did all right, whether they were or not. And so, accepting that it might have been different than we have framed it in that period of time can be challenging, particularly if you still love your parents and want to love them and all the rest of it. But anyway, that could be a whole other podcast. And we're grateful that you came on. Could you tell us how anyone who has listened to this and wants to get in touch with you can find you?
Certainly you can go to my Facebook page. That's fairly easy. Misti Love, Misti with an I. I also have business pages on Facebook, Instagram, on TikTok.
What is that called?
My Restored Wellness.
Okay. My Restored Wellness. Awesome. Is that a website as well?
There is a website. It's the same thing, www.myrestoredwellness.com.
Okay. We'll put that in the show notes.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. I had a great time and I learned a lot from you, and we really appreciate. I think we're gonna call this emotional freedom with Misti Love.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like that too. So thank you folks for listening. Thank you so much, Misti, for being our guest today. And remember, anytime is a great time for more love in your life.